As of the day of me publishing this video, the next mainline Pokemon games have been announced, and Gen 10 will be in full swing this year. Now if you watched my previous video on the 2D Pokemon games, then you've already heard this intro, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. But as the title says, we'll be looking over all the mainline 3D Pokemon games, and even though I didn't mention this in the previous video, I do have some mods and ROM hacks for some of the spin-off and side games for the series, so all of those will be in the spreadsheet down below. But with that, we'll just jump straight into the video with Generation 6. Alright, so getting straight into Generation 6, this is going to be a little bit different from the previous generations, as we're not going to be looking at ROM hacks but actually looking at mods instead. And while Switch modding is a bit tricky, we'll get into that later, 3DS modding isn't so bad. It's really just dragging and dropping your files into a certain place and it should all work. And starting off with X and Y, unfortunately there weren't too many quality of life mods that I could find for this game, and I think that just kind of boils down to 3DS ROM hacking and modding just not being as popular as opposed to the GBA or the DS. Now there is one ROM hack called Eternal X and Wilting Y, and while it does feature some quality of life features, it also kind of acts as a difficulty ROM hack, and that's not really the goal that I'm having for this video. But then again, I know X and Y is kind of famous for being very easy, so if you don't mind that and you actually welcome the difficulty spike, then I would suggest go with that ROM hack, as it really does make X and Y a bit of a more enjoyable game. But if you don't want to do that and just want to improve the game in other ways, there are some visual mods that you can install to this game to make the game look even prettier. The first one being this HD UI texture mod, and this mod is basically going to upscale everything on the UI, going from all the text, from all the icons, to even the Pokemon sprites when you're checking them out in the Pokedex. And if you're running this on an emulator, turning up the internal resolution will definitely make the mod pop out a little bit more. Now there is one thing that I don't like about the mod, and it's that they changed the Pokemon type icons for some reason. And no disrespect to the mod creator, but I just think looking at the Pokemon type icons, they just look a bit uglier than how they were in the base game. So for the next mod, I would honestly suggest you get the Fateful HD Pokemon Types mod, as it's going to restore all of the type icons to how they were in the base game, but they're just going to be HD now. And finally, for the next mod, or less of a mod and more of a cheat, this is going to remove all the outlines for the characters in Pokemon now. I know a lot of people that like to remove the outlines for these games, and I'm sure there's probably even a few of you out there that have probably tried it. But for those who don't know where to look, it's going to be in the spreadsheet down below. So yeah, a bit disappointing for X and Y. I really wish there was more that I can showcase for the game, but until 3DS ROM hacking and modding gets a little bit better, these are the best I can showcase right now. But now getting into Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the mods that I have to showcase are exactly the same ones as X and Y. So yeah, you're gonna have your HD UI mod, the Fateful HD Pokemon Types mod, and removing the outlines as well. Now I will say I did actually manage to find an HD texture pack mod, but not only is it a pain to download because you gotta go through the internet archive to get to it, but a lot of the textures, if I'm not wrong, were upscaled through AI, and as you know, AI upscaling just kind of muddies the textures a bit, so it's not an essential mod, but I did include it in there anyways just in case anybody wants it. And just like with Eternal X and Wilting Y, if you don't mind playing a version of Oraz with a difficulty spike, then I would recommend Rising Ruby and Sinking Sapphire. It's of course going to make some changes to the trainers, but it's also going to introduce a few quality of life changes that I think people will find worth it. But with that, we can now end off Generation 6 on a bit of a disappointing note, but now move on to Generation 7. Alright, so starting off with Pokemon Sun and Moon, we're already kind of starting off on a disappointing note. In terms of quality of life changes, the only one that I could really suggest is the no outlines. And just like the previous games, there is a ROM hack that's called Nova Sun and Umber Moon, which does feature some quality of life changes, like I mentioned before, but it also changes up the trainers, so it's not exactly, sticking to the original game as I would like it to be. I couldn't even really find any HD texture packs, as it seems like everybody is just making them for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And while I do like those games more, Sun and Moon is still unique enough that I know a lot of people prefer it, especially in terms of the story. I was just kind of shocked to find out that Sun and Moon basically doesn't really have anything going for it. But Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is a bit of a different story. While we don't have a whole lot, we still have stuff like the fateful HD Pokemon types, and there's even a no sky battle animation mod. I'm pretty sure most of you can guess what that means, but for those who don't, in X and Y, they introduced that stupid sky battle mechanic that barely anybody cared about, and as a result, a lot of flying Pokemon had this stupid animation where they're just floating above the ground instead of being stationary. So that mod fixes that by actually putting them on the ground, and it looks a lot better in my opinion. And lastly, there is an HD texture pack as I mentioned before, but with this one I didn't really like it as much. While some changes definitely do improve the game's look, in terms of the UI, there's just a few things that I didn't like, and it just kind of took away from Ultra Sun and Moon's charm, that I was kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna make this more of an optional mod than an actual necessity. I think I'll have a video playing in the back so you can kind of see what I mean, but if you don't really mind and you do like the HD textures, I would suggest you go for it. But if you're like me and kind of like how the original Ultra Sun and Moon kind of looked with its UI, then I would suggest kind of leaving it alone. But with that, we're finally going to be moving on to the Switch era Pokemon games, and the first games we're going to be talking about is Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Now, I'm going to just say this right now, the hardware that I'm currently using to record my videos and play most of my games, it's not really the strongest when it comes to running Switch games. And even when they can run, it is very, very slow and it's damn near unplayable. So a lot of the mods that I'm going to be talking about are going to be more based on recommendations and things that I think are good, and less on actual testing, which I don't like. I wish I was able to test out a lot of these mods and see which one works, but I think it's just best if I be honest about that now, instead of having people come back to this video later and say, you know, this mod doesn't work or that mod doesn't work. I'm just gonna put these mods out there as strictly recommendations. But the first highly recommended mod that I suggest you guys download would be the resaturated Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee mod. As you guys already probably know, when Pokemon made the jump to 3D, a lot of the Pokemon kind of lost a bit of their color and they look very desaturated and ugly at times, sometimes barely even looking like how they do in official artwork. So this resaturated mod is essentially just gonna bring back a lot of their color, make them look how they originally did in their older games and how they looked in their older sprites, and it's just gonna be an overall nice visual boost for this game. The next and honestly last mod that I'm gonna recommend is the Modified Evolutions mod. So as the title suggests, it's just gonna make the trade Pokemon evolve through normal leveling, and when it comes to Alolan Pokemon, they're gonna be evolving from stones. Except for Meltan and Melmetal and that whole thing, they're just gonna level up normally, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, Gen 7 kinda got the short end of the stick. Sun and Moon didn't really have anything, and while Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon did, I kinda wish that there was a bit more. And when it comes to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it's one of the more like least popular Pokemon Switch games, so it's kind of understandable why that doesn't have anything like too crazy going for it. But moving forward into Gen 8, it's gonna get a whole lot better. Alright, so getting into Sword and Shield, thankfully there are a lot more quality of life improvements compared to the last two generations. And as I mentioned with Pokemon Let's Go, I don't know how many of these mods actually work, because I know once Sword and Shield got the DLC, some mods kind of become outdated and they don't work on the newest version. But even without testing, I still consider a lot of these mods that I'm about to show to you to be pretty essential if you want to improve your experience with Sword and Shield. The first mod here is the removal of the Calm Y pop-ups. Me and along with a lot of other people have kind of expressed that this is annoying to pop up whenever you do anything, whether it's you doing something with a friend or coming from a raid. It's just annoying to have that thing constantly pop up on your screen for no reason. So this mod is going to remove those pop-ups, and it's just going to make your screen look a lot more clear. Next up is this sped up following Pokemon mod. This makes it so not only will your Pokemon not lag behind you anymore, but it also goes out of its way to fix some of the weird animations, like your Pokemon running in place when it's just simply turning around or anything like that, so it just looks a little bit more smooth. Next up is your standard trade evolution mod. So any Pokemon that evolves through trading can now just be evolved through leveling or stones. Now moving on to some mods that will improve the visuals. This one is a Route 8 revamp mod. In the original game, Route 8 had some bad texturing, but also just didn't look all that visually appealing at times. So this mod kind of just fixes up a lot of that texture work and just makes it look a lot more colorful as compared to before. Next up is this sharpened texture mod, which is essentially just gonna make the wild area and the first few routes of the game look a lot better as compared to the base game. And while we're talking about textures, you guys know I had to include this one. I know the joke is old at this point, but I still felt like it was necessary to include it, that mod being a high resolution tree mod. Yes, the joke is old like I said, but considering that we have all these other mods that are gonna improve the visuals of the game slightly, I might as well include this one. Last but not least, we have a mod, or less of a mod and more of a cheat like we did with X and Y and Auras in the 3DS games. This one is going to remove the outlines in Sword and Shield. Now while the outlines aren't as pronounced, I guess you can say, as compared to the 3DS games, and you can barely notice it, I still figured this would be a nice mod to have, especially if you're going to be boosting your internal resolution for this game if you're playing it on an emulator. So that's going to be it for Sword and Shield, and while there were so many mods to go through, and while there's probably going to be some that people kind of disagree with, I feel like these are gonna make the game at least a little bit better when compared to the base game. Now moving on to BDSP, and man, can I say these games are rough. While I liked BDSP at first, my opinions on the game has slowly but surely turned more negative over the years, and I could safely say that these are probably my least favorite Pokemon games. That's why I'm so thankful that there's two different ways that you can play this game and make it a whole lot better. And while one of them technically hasn't come out yet and it's not finished, I imagine once it is finished, it's probably going to be my main way of playing BDSP moving forward. I'm sure some of you already saw this coming, but the best way to play BDSP is through Luminescent Platinum. And while it does take a more Renegade Platinum approach to what they do with the game, I'd argue a lot of the stuff that's in it is just stuff that should have been in the remake in general. So them adding new Pokemon, while that's something that's not in the original game, it should have been, as that was featured in the other remakes. Along with all the bug fixes and nice additions that they're adding to this game, it's practically a must play if you want to play BDSP nowadays. Now if you want a more vanilla version of this, there's thankfully something that is in the works. This ROM hack is called Shattered Platinum, and to basically best describe what this ROM hack is, and this is coming straight from their Discord, it says what Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is to Diamond and Pearl, Shattered Platinum is to Platinum. So essentially Shattered Platinum is a fateful remake to Pokemon Platinum. But unlike BDSP, Shattered Platinum is going to take some elements from Luminescent Platinum, so that way while it is fateful, there is going to be a whole bunch of new content for people to enjoy. And I imagine once this is all well and done, this is probably going to be the best way to experience the Gen 4 remakes. Alright, and to finally wrap up Generation 8, we have Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now thankfully Legends Arceus doesn't suffer from too many problems as compared to the other games, but there are still a few things that we can include to make the game even better. Let's just start off on the visual front, because while I do love this game, I do think we can improve the visuals just a little bit more. First thing we got here is an HD texture overhaul mod. As the title says, it's gonna replace the original textures with much higher quality ones, and while it is a work in progress and it hasn't been updated in years, so I don't think it's ever gonna be finished, I would say this is still a good mod to have, as this game can look a bit rough at times. Next up we have a draw distance mod, and this is essentially gonna kind of reduce the pop-in that this game has at times, and while it doesn't completely fix it, it does make it less, noticeable and distracting at times. And considering just how much like forests and trees are in this game, I'd say this is a good mod to have. These next two I really like. This is going to be the Sky Improvement mod and the Water Improvement mod. Now the sky and the water never really looked ugly to me. In fact, I'd say depending on what time of day it is, it actually kind of looked pretty nice, but I do think it could have been improved a little bit more. So for the sky mod, when it's daytime, you're going to have more realistic looking clouds, and when it's nighttime, you're going to be having stars and a more realistic looking moon. And when it comes to the water mod, it's still technically a work in progress, which also hasn't been updated in years, so it's probably never going to be finished. But it's still compatible with the sky mod and the HD texture overhaul mod, and it's just going to make the game look a whole lot prettier at times. This one is a big one. This one removes the reflection that the terrain has at times. So I don't know why this was a thing in the original game, but because of how the lighting worked, there was just a lot of moments where the light would reflect on pieces of terrain where, light shouldn't be reflecting off of. So this mod mitigates that and kind of removes that issue. Next up we have another work in progress mod. There's a lot of these, and this one is basically going to improve the textures of the map. I never really found the map in the original game too hard to read, but considering that we're improving the textures of everything else in the game, I'd figure improving the map textures would be a nice little addition as well. Alright, now moving away from the visual aspect, what about actual gameplay aspects that we can improve? Well, the first one I would recommend would be the better Braviary mod. While Braviary wasn't horrible to use in the original game, it definitely had its issues. Two of its biggest issues for me being the way it turns and the fact that it loses a lot of its altitude as you glide longer. But thankfully this mod fixes a lot of those issues, so Braviary's base speed has been increased. You no longer lose altitude unless you're diving down, and the turning radius is much better. Next mod that I have here is an increased swim time mod. One thing that I really did not like in the original game was how little time you had in the water. If you were right next to a piece of land and you were stuck in the water, all it took was 2 to 3 seconds and then you would drown and have to start over. This mod allows you to choose how long you're able to stay in the water now, ranging from 15 seconds to 5 entire minutes. Now I think 5 minutes is a bit excessive unless you're trying to do some type of challenge, so 15 seconds is like the sweet spot for me. Last but not least, we have a mod that's gonna mark the wisp on the map. This was originally gonna be an optional mod since I figured some people may like the challenge of trying to find them on their own, but I imagine a lot of people are gonna be replaying this game, especially if they're gonna be replaying it with mods and they don't want to go through that entire process, so I decided to make this an essential mod for you to download. Because if we're all being honest here, nobody wants to have to look up a YouTube video and go for these wisps one by one, especially if they were already getting them beforehand. But with that, we are officially done with Generation 8. I know it was more visual heavy when it came to Generation 8 and not really quality of life stuff, but I guess that kind of goes to show you that they've been trying to put in more quality of life improvements in their games so they're not as tedious and annoying as beforehand. But with that, we could finally move on to the last generation for this video, that being Generation 9. Alright, so starting off with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there are a lot of things that need to be fixed with this game, mostly on a visual front. But before we get into the mods, I will say that if you want to play the Switch 2 version of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, that is a completely viable option. You're gonna have your higher frame rate, better resolution, and all that other stuff, but there are still some glaring issues that I think playing the Switch 1 version with mods can fix. The first essential mod for Scarlet and Violet that I think you should get is the Remove Ed Sheeran mod. I think that one is self-explanatory. Up next we have some FPS mods. As the name says, it's gonna fix up a lot of the FPS issues that are in the game that we all know of by this point. So it's gonna fix up the stuttering, it's gonna fix up the windmills, it's gonna run at a smooth 60 FPS, and it has some additional graphic mods that you can apply to the game as well. So if you want to improve the graphic quality and run this game at ultra widescreen, you can do that. Our next visual mod is gonna be Area Zero Remastered. This is basically going to touch up on some of the textures in Area Zero, it's going to have new crystal textures, and it even includes a day and night lighting cycle. Now there were supposed to be more updates coming to this mod, but it hasn't been updated in 3 years, so I think this one is kind of dead, but I'd still suggest you try this mod out. This next mod is kind of similar to the Sky mod from Legends Arceus, and this is the Night Sky Redux mod. A pretty simple but still very good mod that replaces the original moon in the original game with a higher quality one, as well as having brighter stars that are going to be appearing in the night. Last but not least, when it comes to the visual side, this one is a 4K cucumber mod. Yeah, this is a bit of a joke mod, but at the same time, if we're going to be improving the visuals of everything else in the game, we might as well include the cucumbers. I'm going to lump these two mods together since they kind of do the same thing, but for the next mods we got Resaturated SV and Resaturated Greedy. Basically the same thing as Resaturated Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. This is going to make the Pokemon's color pop out a lot more. I'll draw some examples on the screen, but as you can see, the change from how they looked before to after is really big, especially Golem. Like, I didn't even realize he was that desaturated beforehand. For this next one, it may not be essential, but it is a weird thing that I find strange is not in the base game, but this is gonna fix up the icon for the 3 segment the Dunsparce. For some reason in the base game, regardless if you got the 3 segment one or the 2 segment one, the icon would always be the 2 segment one, so this mod is gonna fix that issue right up. Next up is allowing you to use the synchro machine anywhere you want. I don't know why they made this limited only to the Indigo disc, as I feel like this could have been a pretty nice thing to have anywhere you go, but regardless, this is going to make it so you could use it anywhere you want. Next mod is No Trade Evolutions. I'm pretty sure that's pretty self-explanatory. We've gone over it multiple times at this point. And the last recommended mod that I have for Scarlet and Violet would be the Open Picnic mod. In the original game, the picnic mechanic was a bit finicky on where you could do it. You really had to be in a very open space or else it just would not work. So this mod makes it so that you can do it practically anywhere. I will say though, do not try to get too close to the NPCs because apparently they can crash your game. And before moving on, I decided that I would include some clothing options since I know when it comes to Scarlet and Violet, a lot of people were disappointed with the customization. And while you may not be able to change out of your school uniform, I'd say a lot of these still add a good amount of variety to your customization. But with that, we could finally move on to our last game and probably my favorite game in the series as of right now, Pokemon Legends ZA. Starting off with our first mod, we have an HD texture pack mod. This is going to help touch up a lot of the lower quality textures that are just featured in the Switch 1 version. And while I don't know how good the textures compare to the Switch 2 version, I imagine they're at least pretty on par, maybe a little bit worse, maybe a little bit better, but this is still regardless a very great mod to have. Next up, we have an FPS and a graphics mod. Kind of like the one mod we saw in Scarlet and Violet earlier, this one's going to have 60 FPS, but it's also going to have 4K shadows, widescreen, a better FOV, and all that other stuff. This one's a very important one. This one's going to put all the exclusive Megastones in the shop now. As some of you may know, some of the Megastones in this game are only attainable through online. And given that they're obviously not going to support this game forever, there's going to be a point in time where you're no longer going to be able to get these. So being able to buy them straight from the shop is a massive improvement. This next one I felt was pretty important, and this one is a ladder icon mod. For a good chunk of this game, you're going to be on the roofs trying to explore and get to different places, but one thing that is very annoying is that you kinda don't know where to go half the time. And while you do have the holovators that are going to help you get onto the roofs, sometimes you need to take a ladder to get on the roof, but they'll never tell you where it is. So while this could make the map a little bit cluttered, I would still say this is an essential mod to have. Last but not least, while not an essential mod, it's still a mod that I figured some people would want, and it is the same gender rival mod. When it was revealed that your rival would be determined on what your gender was going to be, a lot of people were kind of upset because they wanted to pick what rival they wanted. But with this mod, it basically fixes that. So if you want to play as the female character and have Tawny as your rival, you can do that. Or you can play as the male character and have Urbane as your rival. And just like with Scarlet and Violet, if you want to play the Switch 2 edition of this game, this is also a viable option. And with that, that is basically all the best ways that I would say you can play all the mainline Pokemon games. And man, this was such a rough video to try and put together. In case I didn't say it in the beginning, I will say it again here. there technically isn't a definitive way to play all of these games, or technically even a best way to play all of these games, but these are just considered the best way to play the games to me. And if people disagree with that, that's completely okay. If you think there's a mod that I should include, I will gladly look at it and I'll add it to the list. And if there's a mod that is outdated or broken and shouldn't be on there, I will gladly remove it. And it should also be said that, you know, the ROM hacking and modding scene for Pokemon is always growing, so any of these mods and ROM hacks could be replaced at any point in time. There will be a Google spreadsheet in the description that basically has all of the games I talked about here, as well as some optional versions in case you don't want to play the versions that I suggested. I've also listed some fan games and some other games from other series that, while aren't Pokemon, they could scratch that Pokemon itch. This list is ever growing, and if people ever have any type of suggestions that I should add to this list, once again, like I said beforehand, just leave a comment about it. I will look at it, and if I think it's good, I would add it to the list. But other than that, I do want to kind of give a brief update on the channel. So if you really don't care about all of that stuff, that's fine. You can kind of click off of the video here. But I think moving forward, I am going to try and prioritize shorts as opposed to this normal, you know, long form content. And that's mostly because I want to do YouTube so bad, but doing long form content takes up a lot of time, and because I'm in school, it's kind of hard to balance the two. So I'll mostly be doing YouTube shorts and stuff like that for a bit, and if there's anything that requires like a long form video, I'll try my best to get it out in time, but there's no guarantees. And yeah, I mean, I just have a lot of stuff planned for this year. That's if it all goes well. But with that, I'm gonna stop rambling and taking up your time. I hope you all had a blessed day, and I'll see y'all next time.